So in previous class, we talked about the conquest of Constantinople, how Mehmed II was sure to turn it into this capital, and basically brought in all these Greek inhabitants to resettle the city and to build it up again to a major city. At the same time, he also killed the Zirial family that had helped the Ottomans for many generations, and he also killed the frontier warriors who had been his chief generals. And in doing so, he eliminated the other options, the other power bases that were kind of balancing his power. And it also made it that the only way to kind of enter government is to become the descendant of a Byzantine nobleman who was then trained in the palace as a prisoner, or were people recruited through the slave levies on Christian towns, the so-called devshirme. And this is, again, a small group of elite that are being raised in the palace and being trained to run the empire. And that's ultimately who is running the show between, let's say, 1400 and 1600, but especially between 1453 to around 1553. And we're going to look at the type of art that Mehmed II did and why it may have appealed to those very same people, as we'll see in a second. And let me just share this with you. So we are going to here. I do want to point out the fact that Mehmed II had knowledge of Greek and possibly of Latin. So before the siege, so even as when he was learning to read and write, and we still have pieces of his notebooks as a kid there, we know that he was being read to in Arabic, he was being read to in Greek and Latin. Latin he was getting from a Jewish physician called Jacopo da Gaeta, who was serving the Sultan for many years, 30 years. And I think he was obviously Italian, or he was coming from Spain or from Spain via Italy. But he was also, having all sorts of lessons in Arabic and specifically Greek. So he actually was able to follow and to read Greek, and he sponsored a Greek history. And this is partially because he was listening to ancient histories, Laertius, Quintus Curtius, Herodotus, Livy, Chronicles of Popes and Empires. This is what he was receiving every day as scholars were reading to him, probably because he was doing other things. He didn't have time to sit and work his way through books, so it's easier to have that read out loud to him. Now, Mehmed II actually kept a library of books within his larger library, and those were, by kept a library, it kept a library of Greek and Latin works. So he's obviously familiar with them. He probably could read them, but he didn't have the time or the energy to do so, and that's why he had them read out loud. But he also patronized Greek histories, as I said. Critobulus, which is the writer at the time, writes an entire history of the Ottoman Empire, of the conquest. And to kind of legitimize Mehmed II, he casts him as a philosopher king. And you have to think about, well, who is the audience for a Greek history set out, a Greek history about the Ottomans? More surprisingly, too, is that Mehmed II starts inviting, through embassies, inviting Italian-aged artists to come over to Constantinople and to paint him and to create. And so we don't know all of these people, but we have depictions that start circulating in Europe of Mehmed II during this period. So we have paintings and then wood prints, etc. Now, whether these are accurate or not, realistic or not, we don't know, but he also hires Italian artists to come and create medals. Now, the point of these medals were meant to, you exchange them, you sent them around to kings, so then people would have a vision of what your face was and who you're ruling. And then on the side here, you would have your slogan. So you would kind of try to get across in a pithy statement who you are and what you believe in. And so actually over the years, different medals were created and then recreated, cast in different ways. And many of them basically has his face in profile, not even 3/4 profile, this profile, and then him riding a horse. But then here we also have victory, Nike being marched in, and also this 3-crown insignia. Now, these, many of them, the best ones, were created by an Italian artist named Gentile Bellini, who accompanied the Venetian embassy in 1479 and lived for quite a while in Constantinople, where he worked as essentially a painter, a portraiteur of Mehmed II. And that's why we have on the left this very fascinating set of image, again in a classical arch in this 3-crown pattern, the same one we see on his coins, and then that is represented on the medal. And in fact, the medal this medal is based off of this picture, it seems. Now, Mehmed II didn't just, actually, these were made by Italian artists. This is by Bellini, but he was also copied by the Muslim artists of the workshops in the palace, who were able to make very good copies of Bellini's artwork, like this one by Sinan Bey. And other times they are integrated into traditional depictions of the Sultan. So this all looks a bit off. Aspects of the perspective of the way the painting is built in are integrated into this more traditional portrait of Mehmed II. And one of the things that you'll see is that the traditional portraits are based off of essentially Mongol or Timurid models, in which the Sultan is never facing directly at the viewer, nor is it a full profile like in the case here on the left, what Bellini did. Instead, you have a sort of 3/4 profile, right? The Sultan's always turned away like this, but not completely away. And then he's always in a sort of kneeling position with one knee up, usually like this. And this bases itself again off of the idea of Timurid in Turco-Mongol visions of kingship and how a king should sit, just like we have ways of imagining how a president should sit to command or so forth. They had ideas about how a king should sit. And so, for example, this is a picture from 1490s and all the way in Afghanistan, today Afghanistan. And there the court was producing amazing pictures by an artist named Behzad. But the point is here is you can see the type of portraiture that was most common and circulating, at least between the Balkans and South Asia. Bellini did other paintings. He also painted this student, one of my favorites, and this other interesting painting of a janissary. And in fact, these were then copied again by the court painters. And one of the interesting things is that you can see that Sinan Bey, who painted this, seems to have actually put himself as the drawer, done a self-portrait where he's creating other images. One of the nice things to look at is that how he's using his knee as the prop to write on, right? They didn't write on desks, they put paper against the knee and then wrote on that. And sometimes Bellini would create these gigantic images like this, based to some degree off of his time in Alexandria. This was done for, where are they? This group of people dressed very uncharacteristically in black. These were a group of civic leaders, probably pretty wealthy, who commissioned Bellini to paint an amazing painting of them. Here they're in contemporary Venetian dress. Here their wives are depicted in kind of Ottoman or Mamluk dress. And then this is all set in this weird kind of pastiche of Mamluk elements and a bit of Ottoman stuff, and some fantastical things like this giraffe. My point is that for Bellini, he was bringing in all these different elements, drawing all sorts of stuff at that time. And we can actually find a good amount of material just from the Italian artists that were coming over to Istanbul. Now, the question is, why did he create this? Like, why did he put out those medals? Why did he commission these portraits? What was the purpose of it? I think one is that they were meant to be sent out to other European kings, to people all over the world, to get a sense that, this is who I am. I know the language of portraiture. I've hired the best people, and now you can have my medal, and you can think of me as I'm preparing to invade your country. At the same time, for those for whom the medal or that type of portraiture didn't do anything, like polities in Iran or in Central Asia, etc., he sent out more commonplace depictions of himself in the traditional pose of a sultan. And the other thing to think about is that he's building off of the legacy, though, of the Roman Empire, right? He's casting himself as an emperor. And we can see this again in the sort of three-crown insignia, that he's bringing together a kind of a new set of rule. And I think it was lost on people that he was in some ways continuing the old Roman Empire, even though this was never explicitly said, or directly said as often. And what he was trying to do is create a form of art, a form of public representation that would appeal not just to, or at least get sent to kings over in France or elsewhere, but ultimately also for his cadre of administrators who, again, are sons of Byzantine elites, or people from Christian villages who were then taken as slaves, trained, manumitted, and then become major players within the Ottoman administration. So for them, who saw themselves, at least in some ways, as a continuity of the Byzantines, this show appealed to them, and I think probably was meant for their eyes as much as it was for foreign powers or for local audiences. So think about that, and I'll talk to you soon.